Far beyond the edge of known space, there was a line. It was not drawn on any map that ordinary people could see. It was not marked with lights or flags or walls. But every pilot, every captain, every soldier in the galaxy knew about it. They called it the Terran line. No ship crossed it without permission. No fleet came near it without a warning first. For over 100 years, that line had kept the galaxy calm. Empires grew, wars were fought, planets rose and fell, but nobody, not even the mightiest of them, dared to test the Terran line. Until today, far out in the black near a quiet star system called Veyron, a small outpost ship floated in silence. Its name was the Watchtower. It was old, simple, and easy to miss. No weapons showed on its hull. No lights blinked with pride. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing more than a forgotten piece of junk left behind in space. But looks can lie. Inside the Watchtower, a young officer named Ensign Mara Cole sat quietly at her station. She had been on this post for 6 months. Nothing ever happened here. The days were long, and the silence was heavy. She drank her coffee slowly and watched the empty stars on her screen. Then a small light blinked red. Mara sat up fast. Her coffee cup nearly fell from her hand. "Contact," she said out loud, though no one else was in the room. "Unknown fleet approaching border zone." She checked the numbers again. 12 ships, moving fast, coming straight toward the Terran line. Her hands moved quickly over the controls. She sent the standard warning signal, the same one used 1,000 times before. It was simple. It was clear. It said only one thing. "You are approaching restricted Terran space. Turn back now." She waited. Nothing happened. The ships kept coming. She sent the warning again, louder this time. Still nothing. Mara's heart began to beat faster. This had never happened before. Every ship that came close to this line always turned away. It was common knowledge across the galaxy. Terran space was not a place to enter without asking first. But these ships did not stop. They did not even slow down. Mara opened a direct channel to Terran command, far away on the homeworld. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "This is Outpost Watchtower, near Veyron system. Unknown fleet, 12 ships ignoring border warning. Repeat, they are not stopping." There was a short pause. Then a calm voice answered from command. "Copy that, Watchtower. Identify the fleet if possible." Mara zoomed in on her screen. The ships were sleek, silver, and marked with a symbol she recognized from old records. A circle with 3 sharp lines cutting through it. Her stomach turned cold. "Command, I think this is a Galactic Empire fleet," she said. "Empire markings confirmed." Another pause. Longer this time. "Understood," the voice said. "Do not engage. Let command handle it. Continue observation." Mara sat back, her eyes locked on the screen. The ships kept moving forward, crossing invisible marks in space that meant everything to her people, and apparently nothing to the Empire. Far across the galaxy, on the bridge of the lead Empire ship, Admiral Corvin Threx stood tall with his arms crossed behind his back. He was a proud man, tall and strong, with silver hair and cold gray eyes. He had won many battles. He had conquered many worlds. And today, he wanted to prove something. "Admiral," said a young officer nearby, "we are receiving repeated warnings from the Terran border post." Corvin laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Warnings," he said. "That is all they ever send. Words, no fleet, no army, just words on a screen." "Should we respond, sir?" "No," Corvin said. "Let them talk. Humans are new to this galaxy. They think a line in space can stop an empire that has ruled for centuries. It is time someone taught them the truth." The officer nodded, though worry crossed his face for just a moment. "Continue forward," Corvin ordered. "Full speed. We will show the galaxy that the so-called Terran line means nothing." The fleet moved on, 12 ships strong, cutting through the dark like proud knives. Back at Terran command, deep inside a quiet control room on Earth, dozens of officers worked at their stations. Screens glowed with soft blue light. The room was calm, almost too calm for what was about to happen. At the center of the room stood Commander Elias Rook. He was not a loud man. He rarely raised his voice, but when he spoke, everyone listened. He looked at the screen showing the Empire fleet's position. "They are still moving," said an officer beside him. "No sign of stopping." Elias said nothing for a moment. He simply watched the 12 small dots creep closer and closer to the red line marked across the star map. "Confirm one more time," he said quietly. "Give them one final chance." The officer nodded and sent the warning again. 30 seconds passed. The fleet did not stop. Elias took a slow breath. His face did not change. His voice did not shake. "They were warned," he said, 3 times. He turned to another officer standing near a large control panel. "Activate the sentry line," he said. Full response. The officer's hands moved fast across the controls. Deep beneath the surface of a nearby moon, hidden defense stations that had been silent for years suddenly came alive. Thousands of small drones, sleek and fast, shot out into space like a swarm of silver hornets. Back on the watchtower, Mara watched in amazement as the space around her seemed to shimmer and shake. Out of nowhere, countless small ships appeared, moving with perfect timing, like a machine that had been waiting to wake up. The Empire fleet noticed too late. Admiral Corvin's smile disappeared in an instant. "What is that?" he shouted. "Where did they come from?" Before anyone could answer, alarms rang through his ship. "Multiple contacts incoming. Hundreds, no, thousands." The drones moved with terrifying speed and precision. There was no shouting, no warning shots, no chance to turn back. Each Terran drone locked onto its target and fired with cold, exact aim. The first Empire ship exploded in a bright flash of light. Then the second. Then the third. Corvin's crew scrambled to raise shields to turn the ships around to do anything at all, but it was already too late. The drones moved faster than any fleet Corvin had ever seen. They did not hesitate, they did not slow down. They simply did their job with perfect, terrible efficiency. Within 2 minutes, all 12 Empire ships were gone. No survivors, no escape pods. Nothing left but drifting pieces of metal floating silently in space. Back on Earth, the control room stayed quiet. No one cheered. No one celebrated. The officers simply watched the screen as the last Empire ship disappeared from the map. Commander Elias Rook stood still, his hands folded behind his back. "Send a report to the Council," he said. "Border breach, terminated." An officer nearby looked at him, his voice careful. "Sir, was that necessary? All of them?" Elias turned to face him, his eyes calm but firm. "They were warned 3 times, he said. "We do not ask a 4th time." The officer said nothing more. Word of what happened spread fast across the galaxy. Within hours, the Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from a dozen different worlds gathered in a large circular room, their faces filled with shock and fear. 12 ships, said one council member, an elderly alien with pale blue skin. Gone. In minutes. "The humans did not even send a fleet," said another. "Only machines. Only drones." A tall representative from a powerful trading empire stood up, his voice sharp with anger. "This cannot go unanswered. They destroyed an Empire fleet without warning." "They warned them 3 times, interrupted a quiet voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look. It was a small, thin alien named Sorel, an ambassador who had worked closely with Terran diplomats before. "I have seen their border logs. They always warn first. Always. But once that warning is ignored..." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "They do not stop until the threat is gone." The room fell silent. Someone finally asked the question that had been sitting heavy in everyone's mind. Why? Why do they defend that line so fiercely? What are they hiding? Sorel looked around the room slowly, then answered in a low voice. "No one knows for certain, but there are old stories. Some say the humans once lost everything trying to make peace the easy way. Some say they learned long ago that mercy without strength only invites more war. He paused again. Whatever the reason, one thing is now clear to all of us. He looked directly at the council. Terran command does not make idle threats, and crossing their line is no longer a mistake anyone can afford to make twice. The room stayed silent for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking into every corner of the chamber. Far away, near the quiet border of Terran space, Ensign Mara Cole sat once again at her station on the watchtower. The stars outside were calm now, peaceful, as if nothing had happened at all. But she knew better. She looked at the empty space where 12 ships had once been and whispered quietly to herself. Terran command had only one rule. She turned back to her screen, watching the stars in silence. No one crosses. No one asks why. News of the lost fleet spread through the galactic empire like fire through dry grass. In the great capital of Threxis Prime, the empire's home planet, whispers filled every hallway. Soldiers spoke in low voices. Officers avoided each other's eyes. No one wanted to be the one who told the emperor the truth, but someone had to. Inside the massive throne hall of the imperial palace, tall pillars of black stone rose high into the ceiling. Banners with the empire's symbol hung on every wall. At the far end of the hall sat Emperor Valus Threx, ruler of 1,000 worlds, seated on a throne made of dark metal and old bones from conquered enemies. He was Admiral Corvin's father. When the news reached him, the emperor did not shout. He did not break anything. He simply sat still, his face like stone, for almost a full minute. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. Say that again. The messenger, a nervous young officer, bowed low. My emperor, the fleet sent to the Terran border, all 12 ships, destroyed, including your son's flagship. Silence filled the room. How? The emperor asked. Drones, my emperor. Terran defense drones. Thousands of them appearing without warning. The fleet had no chance to respond. The emperor's hands gripped the arms of his throne tightly. My son is dead, he said slowly, because a group of primitive apes decided a line in space was more important than an empire? No one answered. No one dared. The emperor stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the hall. Send word to every commander, he said, his voice rising with anger. Prepare the second fleet. Prepare the third. I want every ship ready within 1 week. An older general stepped forward, his face pale with worry. My emperor, if I may speak freely. Speak. The humans destroyed 12 warships in under 2 minutes. We do not yet understand their weapons, their tactics, or their true strength. Perhaps we should study them first. Send scouts. Learn before we attack. The emperor turned slowly, his cold eyes locking onto the general. You wish for me to sit quietly, he said, while my son's death goes unanswered? No, my emperor, but enough. The general bowed his head and said nothing more. The emperor looked around the room at his gathered officers and generals. The humans think they are safe behind their little line, he said. They think fear alone will protect them forever. They are wrong. We built this empire through strength, through iron, through the will to conquer. We did not become rulers of 1,000 worlds by turning away from a challenge. He raised his hand high. Prepare for war. Far away on a quiet moon near the edge of empire space, a woman named Sorel sat alone in her small ship. She was the same soft-spoken ambassador who had spoken carefully at the Galactic Council meeting. She had spent many years working between different worlds, trying to keep peace where she could. Now she feared peace was slipping away. Her communicator beeped. A message from an old friend, a low-ranking officer inside the Empire's fleet command. She opened the message. His voice was quiet, nervous. Sorel, they are really doing it. The Emperor has ordered a full invasion fleet. Not just 12 ships this time, hundreds, maybe more. They want to punish the humans for what happened to the Admiral's fleet. Sorel closed her eyes, her heart heavy. They don't understand, she whispered to herself. They think this is about pride. They don't see what is really happening. She quickly recorded a message of her own, her voice calm but urgent. This is Ambassador Sorrell, requesting priority contact with Terran Command. I have information regarding Imperial fleet movements. Please respond as soon as possible. She sent the message and waited, staring out at the stars, hoping someone would listen before it was too late. Meanwhile, deep within Terran space, life continued much as it always had. Terran Command Headquarters sat inside a massive underground facility on Earth, hidden safely beneath layers of rock and steel. Above ground, cities moved on with daily life, unaware of how close war truly was. Commander Elias Rook sat in his office, reviewing reports from the recent border encounter. His desk was simple, clean, and orderly, much like the man himself. A knock came at his door. "Enter," he said. A young officer stepped inside, holding a small data pad. "Sir, we've received an urgent message. Ambassador Sorrell from the Galactic Council. She says she has information about Empire fleet movements." Elias raised an eyebrow slightly, one of the few signs of emotion he ever showed. "Bring her message up," he said. The officer connected the call, and Sorrell's face appeared on the screen, her expression tired but serious. "Commander Rook," she said, "I apologize for reaching out directly, but I believe you need to hear this immediately." "Go ahead," Elias said calmly. "The Emperor has ordered a full invasion fleet to move against Terran space. Not a scouting mission, not a test, a real attack. Hundreds of ships. They plan to punish you for the destruction of Admiral Corvin's fleet." Elias's face did not change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. "How many ships exactly?" "Unconfirmed, but my sources suggest between 300 and 500, possibly more if the Emperor pulls forces from other fronts." Elias leaned back slightly in his chair, thinking. "Why are you telling us this, Ambassador? You work for the Council, not for us." Sorrell paused, choosing her words with care. "Because I believe war benefits no one. Because I have seen what happens when pride leads decisions instead of wisdom. And because I do not wish to see more needless death on either side." Elias studied her face for a long moment. "Thank you for the information," he said finally. "We will prepare accordingly." "Commander," Sorrell added quickly before the connection could end, "please understand something. The Emperor is grieving his son. He is not thinking clearly. This attack may not be about strategy at all. It may simply be about revenge." Elias nodded slowly. "Understood," he said. "We will keep that in mind." The connection ended, and Elias sat quietly for a moment, staring at the empty screen. He pressed a button on his desk. "Get me Fleet Command, full briefing, 1 hour." 1 hour later, a large room filled with Terran military leaders, all gathered around a glowing holographic map of the galaxy. Commander Elias Rook stood at the front, his face calm as always. "We have credible information," he began, "that the Galactic Empire is preparing a large invasion fleet, possibly numbering in the hundreds, in direct response to the border incident 3 days ago." Murmurs spread across the room. "This is expected," Elias continued. "We knew that destroying Admiral Corvin's fleet would provoke a response. What we did not expect was the scale." A senior officer raised her hand. "Commander, do we have the strength to hold the line against a force that large?" Elias nodded slowly. "Yes. Our defense systems were built for exactly this kind of scenario. However, size is not the only concern. According to Ambassador Sorrell, this attack may be driven by emotion rather than strategy. That makes the Empire's next move harder to predict." Another officer spoke up. "Should we consider a preemptive strike? Hit their fleet before it reaches us?" Elias shook his head firmly. "No, we do not start wars. We only finish them. Terran Command exists to defend, not to conquer. We will hold our position, exactly as we always have." He turned toward the holographic map, where a small red line marked the border of Terran space. "Reinforce all border defenses," he ordered. "Activate additional drone reserves. Bring the fleet to full readiness. If the Empire wishes to test our line again, we will be ready." The officers around the room nodded, already moving to carry out his orders. Elias looked at the map for a long moment. His eyes focused on the vast empty space between Terran territory and the approaching storm. They think this is about anger, he murmured quietly to himself. But it is about to become something else entirely. Back on Threx's Prime, preparations for war moved quickly. Massive shipyards worked day and night, building new warships and repairing old ones. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. The entire planet buzzed with energy, driven by anger, pride, and the desire for revenge. Inside a private chamber, away from the noisy preparations, a Terran spy quietly slipped through the shadows. Her name was Agent Lyra Voss, one of Terran Command's most skilled operatives, sent secretly to gather information from within enemy territory. She moved carefully through a maintenance hallway, her uniform disguised as an Imperial technician's. She carried a small device hidden in her sleeve, recording everything she saw and heard. Through a window, she watched as workers loaded weapons onto massive warships, each one designed for one purpose only: to conquer. She whispered quietly into her hidden communicator. Confirmed. Empire preparing large-scale invasion force. Estimated size 450 ships. Departure expected within 5 days. She paused, watching the workers move with grim determination. They believe they can overwhelm us with numbers, she added. They do not yet understand what they are truly facing. She quickly and quietly slipped away, her mission complete for now, but her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. Days passed. Tension grew heavier across both sides of the galaxy. On Earth, Terran Command continued its quiet, disciplined preparations. Drones were checked and rechecked. Defense stations were reinforced. Soldiers trained without pause, though few outside command truly understood the scale of what was approaching. On Threx's Prime, the mood was different, loud and full of fierce pride. Soldiers marched through the streets, cheered on by crowds eager for revenge. Banners depicting the Empire's symbol hung from every building. Speeches filled the airwaves, promising glory and victory over the weak humans who had dared to defy the Empire. But not everyone shared this confidence. In a quiet corner of the palace, away from the noise and celebration, Ambassador Sorrel stood beside an old friend, General Draymond, one of the few Empire officers who had voiced caution earlier. They do not understand what they are walking into, Sorrel said softly. Draymond sighed heavily. I fear you may be right, but pride is a powerful thing, Ambassador. Once it takes hold, logic rarely survives. Sorrel looked out of a nearby window, watching soldiers march below with confident smiles and raised weapons. I only hope, she whispered, that this pride does not cost more lives than anyone can bear. Draymond said nothing, his eyes following hers toward the soldiers below, unaware of the storm they were about to walk into. Finally, the day arrived. Deep within the Imperial shipyards, hundreds of warships stood ready, engines glowing bright with power. Admiral Threxis Corin, a proud and confident commander chosen personally by the Emperor, stood at the head of the fleet, staring out at the vast armada under his control. 450 ships, he said proudly to his officers. No force in this galaxy has ever faced a fleet this size and survived. His officers nodded eagerly, filled with confidence and excitement. Today, Corin continued, we teach the humans a lesson they will never forget. Today, we avenge Admiral Corvin. Today, we prove the Empire's strength to the entire galaxy. He raised his hand high, and across the vast shipyard, thousands of soldiers cheered loudly. Set course, Corin ordered, for Terran space. Slowly, the massive fleet began to move, engines roaring to life, ready to cross a line that had never before been challenged on such a scale. Far away, Terran Command watched quietly as the fleet's movements were detected, tracked, and confirmed. Commander Elias Rook stood calmly before the glowing map, watching the red dots representing the Empire fleet begin their journey toward the border. He turned to his officers, his voice steady and calm. They are coming, he said simply. Prepare the defense. No one in the room spoke. No one needed to. They all understood clearly now. The Empire had made its choice, and soon they would learn exactly what that choice would cost them. The Imperial fleet moved through space like a slow, dark storm cloud. 450 ships spread wide across the stars, their engines glowing with quiet power. Admiral Corrin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Verdict, watching the empty space ahead with hungry eyes. "Distance to Terran border?" he asked. 2 days, sir," answered his navigation officer. "At current speed." Corrin nodded, satisfied. "Send scouts ahead. I want eyes on their defenses before we arrive. No surprises this time." 3 small scout ships broke away from the main fleet, faster and quieter than the rest. Their job was simple: slip close to the border, gather information, and return without being noticed. But nothing about the Terran line worked the way the Empire expected. Ensign Mara Cole was still at her post aboard the watchtower, though her hands no longer shook the way they had during the first attack. She had grown sharper since that day, more alert, more focused. She watched her screens carefully, knowing the real fight was still coming. A soft chime sounded. "Small contacts," she said quietly, leaning forward. 3 ships, fast movers, scout class by the look of them. She checked their path. They were moving carefully, staying just outside the main border, trying to gather data without crossing the line completely. Mara opened a channel to command. "Command, this is Watchtower. 3 Empire scout ships approaching border zone. They are not crossing yet. Just observing." A calm voice answered from the other end. It was a new voice, younger than Elias Rook's. Confident, steady. "Copy, Watchtower. This is Commander Talia Reyes, Border Response Division. We see them too. Hold position and monitor." Mara blinked, slightly surprised. She hadn't worked directly with Commander Reyes before, though she had heard the name. Talia Reyes was young for her rank, barely 30 years old, but she had earned her position through skill, not luck. Many considered her one of the sharpest minds in Terran defense strategy. "Understood," Mara replied. On a nearby defense station, hidden deep within a quiet asteroid field, Talia Reyes stood in a small command room, watching the scout ships carefully on her display. Unlike the drones used in the first attack, this station was built for close observation and quick, precise action. "They're testing us," she said to her second-in-command, a calm older officer named Sergeant Duke Okafor. "Should we engage?" Okafor asked. "Not yet," Talia said. "Let them think they're getting away with it. Let them get just close enough." She watched the screen carefully, her eyes sharp and focused. "Patience," she murmured. "Just a little more." Aboard the lead scout ship, a young Imperial pilot named Lieutenant Vex Dorn leaned forward in his seat, eyes scanning his instruments eagerly. "No visible defenses," he reported to his commanding officer through the comm. "Border seemed quiet." "Keep scanning," came the reply. "The Admiral wants full details before the fleet arrives." Vex smiled slightly, feeling confident. Everyone back home had spoken of the humans' mysterious defenses with fear, whispered stories of drones appearing from nowhere. But out here, everything looked calm, empty, almost peaceful. "Maybe the stories were exaggerated," he said quietly to his co-pilot. "Maybe," she replied, though her voice carried a note of doubt. They pushed slightly closer, eager to gather better data, unaware that they were being watched far more closely than they realized. Back at the hidden Terran station, Talia Reyes watched the scout ships creep closer. Her fingers rested lightly on the controls. "That's close enough," she said softly. She turned to Okafor. "Signal them. Standard warning." A message shot out toward the scout ships, calm and clear. "You are entering restricted space. Turn back immediately." Inside the lead scout ship, Vex frowned as the warning appeared on his screen. "They see us," he muttered. "Should we retreat?" his co-pilot asked. Vex hesitated. He wanted more data. He wanted to prove himself to Admiral Corrin, to show he could gather more information than any coward who turned back at the first warning. "Just a little closer," he said. "One more pass." He pushed the ship forward, crossing slightly deeper into the marked border zone. Talia Reyes watched calmly from her station. They didn't listen, Okafor said. No, Talia said quietly. They didn't. She pressed a button on her console. Engage. From hidden positions along the asteroid field, 3 sleek Terran interceptors shot forward, moving with precise, controlled speed. They did not fire wildly. They did not waste a single shot. Each pilot targeted exact weak points on the enemy scout ships, disabling engines and weapon systems with careful precision. Inside the lead scout ship, alarms blared suddenly. Contact! Multiple contacts incoming fast! Vex's hands flew across his controls, panic rising in his chest. Evasive maneuvers, now! But it was too late. A precise shot struck his ship's engine, crippling it instantly. The ship spun wildly, losing power, drifting helplessly through space. The other 2 scout ships fared no better. Within seconds, all 3 were disabled, their weapons destroyed, their engines dead, leaving them stranded and powerless. Vex sat frozen in his seat, breathing hard, staring out at the approaching Terran interceptors. They didn't destroy us, he whispered, confused. Why didn't they destroy us? Aboard one of the Terran interceptors, Talia Reyes's voice came through calmly on an open channel, broadcast directly to the disabled scout ships. Imperial vessels, this is Commander Talia Reyes, Terran Defense Force. Your ships have been disabled. You are not being destroyed. Not yet. Inside his crippled ship, Vex swallowed hard, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Listen carefully, Talia continued, her voice steady and calm. Return to your fleet. Deliver this message exactly as I say it. She paused for a brief moment, choosing her words with precision. Terran Command does not seek war. We do not wish for further bloodshed. But know this clearly. We will defend our border with everything we have. The next fleet that crosses this line uninvited will not be given a warning. Vex sat silently, absorbing every word. You have one chance, Talia said. Turn back now and end this before it becomes something neither side can undo. The channel closed. For a long moment, Vex sat frozen, staring at the empty static on his comm screen. They let us go, his co-pilot whispered, disbelief clear in her voice. Vex slowly nodded, though his mind raced with unanswered questions. They didn't have to, he murmured. They wanted to. They wanted us to carry this message back. Hours later, the disabled scout ships limped back toward the main Imperial fleet, their engines barely functioning, systems damaged but crews alive. Admiral Corrin stood waiting aboard the Iron Verdict, arms crossed, his expression darkening as he listened to Vex's shaky report. They disabled you, Corrin said slowly, but did not destroy you. Yes, sir, Vex answered nervously. They said it was a message, a warning. Corrin's jaw tightened. A warning, he repeated coldly, as if we are children needing discipline. He turned away, staring out at the vast stars ahead, thinking carefully. They wish to show mercy, he said finally, to prove they are stronger than us even in restraint. He clenched his fists tightly. They are wrong. He turned back to his officers, his voice hardening with resolve. Increase fleet speed. We move immediately, full force, no more delays. Let them see exactly what true strength looks like. His officers nodded quickly, hurrying to carry out his orders. Back at Terran Command, Commander Elias Rook listened carefully as Talia Reyes reported the encounter directly to him through a secure channel. You let them go, Elias said, his tone unreadable. Yes, sir, Talia replied confidently. I believed a clear message would serve us better than needless destruction. They needed to understand we are not eager for war, only firm in our defense. Elias considered her words carefully, his expression thoughtful. A wise decision, Commander, he said finally, though I suspect Admiral Corrin will not see it as mercy. No, sir, Talia agreed. I believe he will see it as an insult. Elias nodded slowly, his eyes shifting to the holographic map. watching the massive Imperial fleet continue its approach, now moving even faster than before. "Prepare all forces," he said quietly. "The real battle begins soon." Talia straightened, her voice firm and steady. "Yes, sir. We'll be ready." Far away, aboard her hidden ship near Empire Space, Ambassador Sorel received word of the encounter through her secret contacts. She closed her eyes, feeling a heavy weight settle in her chest. "They gave him a chance," she whispered to herself, "and he refused it." She looked out at the stars, worry deepening on her face. "This is no longer about pride," she murmured. "This is about to become something far worse." She quickly sent a final message to her contact within Terran Command, her voice heavy with concern. "Commander Rook, the Empire fleet is now moving at full speed, no longer cautious, no longer careful. They will reach your border much sooner than expected. I fear there will be no more warnings from either side." She closed the connection, staring silently into the endless dark of space, waiting anxiously to see what would happen next. The Imperial fleet raced through space, engines burning bright, faster now than caution allowed. 450 warships moved together in tight formation. A dark wall of steel and fire aimed straight at the Terran border. Aboard the Iron Verdict, Admiral Corrin stood rigid on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the growing red line marked on his display. Behind him, officers moved quickly, checking weapon systems, confirming shield strength, preparing for what was coming. "Distance to border?" Corrin asked. 6 hours, sir," answered his navigation officer. Corrin nodded slowly. "Signal all ships, full combat readiness, no more scouts, no more warnings. When we reach that line, we cross it together, as one fleet, unstoppable. Across the massive armada, thousands of soldiers prepared for battle. Weapons were loaded, shields were charged. Fear and excitement mixed together in the hearts of young soldiers who had never before faced a real war. One young gunner, barely 19 years old, sat nervously at his station aboard one of the smaller cruisers. His name was Private Ren Ashvale, fresh from training, eager to prove himself, but terrified of what lay ahead. Beside him sat an older soldier, Sergeant Boro Fenn, a scarred veteran who had fought in a dozen campaigns across the galaxy. "Nervous, kid?" Boro asked, noticing Ren's shaking hands. "A little," Ren admitted quietly. Boro chuckled softly. "Good. Nervous keeps you alive. It's the ones who feel nothing that die first." Ren managed a small, tense smile, grateful for the older man's calm presence. "Do you think the stories are true?" Ren asked. "About the drones? About how fast they move?" Boro's smile faded slightly. "I've heard the reports. Machines, fast and precise, no hesitation. If it's true, this won't be like any battle we've fought before." Ren swallowed hard, staring out at the vast fleet surrounding him, suddenly feeling very small. Meanwhile, deep within Terran Command's underground headquarters, the mood was calm, but tense beneath the surface. Commander Elias Rook stood before the massive holographic display, watching the Imperial fleet's steady approach. Beside him stood Commander Talia Reyes, freshly arrived from her border post, her face sharp with focus. 6 hours until they reach the border," Talia said. Elias nodded. "Status of our defenses? All drone reserves active," Talia reported. "Sentry stations fully charged. Fleet Command has positioned 3 defense groups along likely entry points." Elias studied the map carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly. 450 ships is a serious force," he said quietly. "Even for us." Talia frowned slightly, surprised by his tone. "Sir, our systems handled 12 ships without difficulty. Surely our defenses can manage." "Numbers alone do not win wars, Commander," Elias interrupted gently. "The First Fleet was arrogant, careless. This fleet moves with purpose now, driven by anger and revenge. That makes them more dangerous, not less." Talia considered his words carefully, nodding slowly in understanding. "What are your orders, sir?" Elias took a slow breath, his mind working through careful strategy. "Full defense protocol," he said finally. "Drones first, to weaken their numbers and disrupt formation. Then interceptor squadrons to target key command ships. If necessary, activate the Iron Wall. Talia's eyes widened slightly. The Iron Wall? Sir, that system hasn't been used in... I know, Elias said calmly. But if this fleet is as determined as Ambassador Sorrel warns, we may need every advantage we have. Talia nodded firmly. Understood, sir. I'll prepare the teams. As she turned to leave, Elias called after her once more. Commander. She paused, looking back. Remember, Elias said quietly, our goal is not conquest. It is survival and peace, if peace is still possible. Fight to defend, not to destroy needlessly. Talia nodded seriously. I understand, sir. She left quickly, already calling out orders to her teams as she moved through the corridors. Back aboard the Iron Verdict, Admiral Corrin received a final report from his scouts, confirming the layout of Terran defenses along the border. They've reinforced heavily, his intelligence officer reported. Drone stations, interceptor squadrons, hidden defense platforms scattered across multiple sectors. Corrin studied the information carefully, his expression hardening. They expect us, he muttered. Should we adjust our approach, sir? The officer asked. Corrin thought for a moment, then shook his head firmly. No, we do not need clever tricks. We have overwhelming numbers. We will strike directly, hit their defenses head-on, and break through with sheer force. He turned to address his assembled officers, his voice rising with confidence. The humans rely on precision, coordination, discipline, but even the most disciplined defense can be overwhelmed by enough force, enough determination. Today we prove that strength always finds a way. His officers cheered, filled with renewed confidence, their fear pushed aside by pride and determination. Corrin turned back toward the viewport, watching as the border grew steadily closer. Prepare for full engagement, he ordered quietly. This ends today. Hours passed slowly, tension building steadily as both sides prepared for the coming clash. Finally, the Imperial fleet reached the edge of Terran space, their massive formation stretching wide across the stars. Aboard Terran defense platforms hidden throughout the border sector, soldiers stood ready at their stations, hearts pounding with anticipation. Commander Talia Reyes stood at the center of her command station, watching calmly as the Imperial fleet's positions appeared clearly on her display. They're here, she said quietly. Beside her, Sergeant Duke Okafor nodded grimly. No more scouts this time, no more warnings. Talia took a slow breath, steadying herself. Signal command, she said. Imperial fleet has reached the border, awaiting further orders. A response came quickly from Commander Elias Rook himself, his voice steady and calm despite the tension. Hold your position, Commander. Let them make the first move. If they cross the line, respond with full force, exactly as planned. Understood, sir, Talia replied. She turned back to her display, watching closely as the massive Imperial fleet slowed its approach, hovering just outside the marked border. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Both sides waited silently, the stars themselves seeming to hold their breath. Then, Admiral Corrin's voice broke through on an open channel, transmitted directly toward the Terran defenses. Terran Command, Corrin's voice boomed confidently across the silent space. You have destroyed one fleet already, humiliated my son, and mocked our warnings with false mercy. Today we reclaim our honor. Today we cross your precious line, and there is nothing you can do to stop us. Silence followed his words, heavy and thick with tension. Then, without waiting for a response, Corrin gave his final order. Fleet, advance, cross the border now. The massive Imperial fleet surged forward together, 450 ships crossing the invisible line all at once, their engines roaring with determined power. Aboard her station, Talia Reyes watched calmly as the fleet crossed clearly onto her display. They've crossed, she said quietly into her comm. Command orders? Elias Rook's voice returned instantly, calm but firm. Engage defense protocol. Full response. Talia nodded firmly, her voice steady despite the storm about to break loose. Understood, she said. All stations, this is Commander Reyes. Enemy fleet has crossed the border. Activate drone defense grid. Engage at will. Across the vast border sector, hidden defense platforms sprang to life. Thousands of drones shot outward once again, their formations sharp and precise, moving swiftly to intercept the massive incoming fleet. Aboard the Iron Verdict, Admiral Corrin watched calmly as the drones appeared on his display exactly as he had expected. There they are, he said, almost smiling. Just as predicted. He turned to his officers, voice hardening with resolve. All ships, engage defensive formations. Focus fire on their drone swarms. Do not let their machines break our lines. The massive fleet spread out into practiced battle formations, weapons charging brightly as they prepared to meet the incoming wave of Terran drones head-on. Private Ren Ashvale sat tensely at his gunner's station, sweat forming on his brow as he watched the drones approach rapidly on his screen. Steady, kid, Sergeant Boro Fenn said calmly beside him. Just like training. Aim true, fire steady. Ren nodded nervously, gripping his controls tightly. Then, the drones arrived, moving with terrifying speed and precision, striking the Imperial fleet's outer defenses with sudden, violent force. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, bright flashes marking the beginning of the battle both sides had been dreading. The Empire had struck back, and now the true fight for the galaxy's future had finally begun. Space lit up with fire. Thousands of Terran drones clashed against the massive Imperial fleet, and for the first time, the humans faced real resistance. The Empire's ships were not weak scouts anymore. They were warships, built for war, packed with soldiers who had trained their whole lives for exactly this moment. Aboard the Iron Verdict, Admiral Corrin watched the battle unfold with sharp, careful eyes. Their drones are fast, he admitted to his officers, but they are small, weak against our shields, one at a time. Hold formation. Let them break against us. His strategy seemed to work at first. The Imperial ships, arranged in tight defensive clusters, absorbed the drone strikes with heavy shields, losing only a few ships in the opening minutes. Explosions flashed across the dark sky, but the Empire's wall held strong. "Sir," an officer called out, "drone effectiveness is dropping. Our shield adjustments are working." Corrin allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Good. Keep pressing forward. Once we break through their outer defense, we strike straight at their command stations." Back at her command station, Talia Reyes watched the battle carefully, her jaw tightening as she noticed the same pattern Corrin had spotted. "They're adapting," she muttered. "Their shields are countering our drone formations." Sergeant Duke Okafor frowned beside her. "Should we pull the drones back?" "No," Talia said quickly. "Change tactics. Signal all drone units, switch to scatter formation, hit their weak points directly, engines and weapon arrays, not shields." Okafor relayed the orders immediately, the drone formations shifting in an instant, moving with sharp, sudden precision. Instead of striking shields head-on, they darted around the edges, targeting engines and gun turrets with pinpoint accuracy. The effect was immediate. Imperial ships, confident in their shield strength, suddenly found their engines failing, their weapons disabled one after another. Aboard the Iron Verdict, Corrin's confidence wavered slightly as reports of damaged engines and disabled weapons flooded in. "They're changing tactics," his officer said nervously. Corrin's jaw tightened. "Then we change ours as well. Bring the heavy cruisers forward. Overwhelm their drone control stations directly." On the ground, hidden deep within a fortified bunker near the border, Commander Elias Rook watched the battle unfold on a massive holographic display, his expression calm but focused. "They're pushing toward our control stations," an officer reported nervously. "If those fall, we lose coordination over the drone swarms." Elias nodded slowly, expecting exactly this move. "Activate secondary defense grid. Bring interceptor squadrons forward to protect the control stations directly." Terran interceptors, fast and heavily armed, shot outward from hidden positions, moving swiftly to intercept the approaching Imperial cruisers. Aboard one such interceptor, Young pilot Captain Nadia Voss gripped her controls tightly, guiding her ship skillfully through the chaos of battle. She had trained for years for this exact moment, and now, facing real combat for the first time, her instincts took over completely. "Target their engines first," she instructed her squadron calmly. "Disable, don't destroy unless necessary." Her squadron moved swiftly, striking precise blows against the approaching Imperial cruisers, slowing their advance and buying precious time for the control stations to remain active. Meanwhile, aboard his ship, Private Ren Ashvale fired desperately at incoming Terran interceptors, his hands shaking with adrenaline and fear. "Steady, kid," Sergeant Borofen shouted beside him. "Focus your aim, don't waste shots." Ren nodded, forcing himself to steady his hands, firing more precisely now, managing to strike a passing interceptor's wing, sending it spinning away. "Good hit," Boro shouted encouragingly, but their small victory was short-lived. Moments later, a precise shot from another interceptor struck their ship's main engine, causing a violent shudder throughout the vessel. Alarms blared loudly. "Engine critical," Ren shouted, panic rising in his voice. Boro quickly checked the damage readouts, his expression grim. "We're losing power fast. Brace yourself, kid." Their ship drifted helplessly, sparks flying from damaged consoles as the battle raged fiercely around them. Back aboard the Iron Verdict, Admiral Corrin watched with growing frustration as reports of damaged and disabled ships continued to pour in. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 32 disabled, 12 destroyed, his officer reported nervously. Corrin's fists clenched tightly. "And their control stations?" "Still active, sir. Their interceptors are protecting them fiercely." Corrin's frustration grew, his careful strategy slowly slipping away as the battle became messier, more chaotic than he had anticipated. "Bring the flagship forward," he ordered suddenly. "Direct assault on their primary control station. Enough games." His officers hesitated, clearly worried by the aggressive move, but none dared question the Admiral's direct order. The Iron Verdict surged forward, massive and powerful, weapons charging brightly as it aimed directly at the heart of Terran defenses. At Terran command, Elias Rook watched calmly as the massive flagship advanced directly toward their primary control station. "They're targeting our main station directly," an officer reported urgently. "Should we retreat the station?" Elias shook his head firmly. "No. Hold position. Activate the iron wall." The officer's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, are you certain? That system hasn't been used since—" "I am certain," Elias interrupted calmly. "Activate it now." Quickly, hidden defense platforms across the border sector shifted position, aligning precisely around the approaching Iron Verdict. Suddenly, a massive shimmering energy field appeared, surrounding the Terran control station in a protective dome of pure defensive power. Aboard the Iron Verdict, Corrin watched in surprise as his ship's weapons fired uselessly against the shimmering barrier. "What is this?" he demanded. "Unknown defense system, sir," his officer replied nervously. "Our weapons are having no effect." Corrin's frustration boiled over into anger. "Then ram it. Break through with sheer force if we must." The massive flagship surged forward, colliding directly with the shimmering barrier. Sparks and energy flashed brightly, but the barrier held firm, absorbing the impact completely. Back at the command station, Talia Reyes watched in amazement as the iron wall held steady against the flagship's assault. "It's holding," she said, relief clear in her voice. Elias nodded calmly, though his eyes remained sharp and focused. "Now, Commander, it's time to finish this. Signal all interceptor squadrons. Converge on the flagship directly." Talia quickly relayed the orders, and swiftly, dozens of Terran interceptors converged from all directions, surrounding the massive Imperial flagship, striking precisely at its weakened defenses. Aboard the Iron Verdict, alarms blared loudly, warning of critical damage across multiple systems. "Shields failing," an officer shouted. "Weapons offline, engines critical." Corrin stood frozen for a moment, staring at the chaos unfolding around him, realizing suddenly that victory was slipping rapidly from his grasp. "Retreat. he finally said quietly, his voice heavy with defeat. "Signal the fleet. Retreat immediately." But it was too late. The Terran interceptors continued their assault, relentless and precise, until finally, the Iron Verdict itself drifted powerless, its weapons silent, its engines dead. Back at Terran Command, Elias Rook watched calmly as the flagship's status changed to disabled on his display. "The flagship is down," Talia reported, relief evident in her voice. "Remaining Imperial ships are retreating." Elias nodded slowly, allowing himself a brief moment of quiet relief. "Casualties?" he asked. "Moderate losses on our side," Talia reported. "Nothing compared to the Empire's losses." Elias studied the display carefully, watching the remaining Imperial ships retreat hastily back toward their own territory. "Today, we defended our home," he said quietly. "But this war is far from over." Talia nodded seriously, understanding clearly the weight of his words. "What now, sir?" she asked. Elias turned toward her, his expression calm but resolute. "Now," he said quietly, "we prepare for what comes next." The retreat of the Imperial fleet was not orderly. Ships limped away in broken formations, engines sputtering, hulls scarred black from drone fire and battle. What had left Threx's prime as a proud armada of 450 warships now crawled back through space as a wounded, scattered remnant of barely 200. Aboard the drifting wreck of the Iron Verdict, Admiral Corrin sat in silence, staring at the shattered remains of his command console. Around him, his officers worked quietly, desperately trying to restore enough power to limp the ship home. "Status report," Corrin said, his voice hollow. "Engines at 15%, an officer replied quietly. "Weapons offline. Life support stable for now." Corrin closed his eyes, the weight of defeat pressing heavily on his chest. He had come here promising glory, promising revenge, promising to prove the Empire's unstoppable strength. Instead, he had lost more than half his fleet, and worse, he had lost the one thing an empire like his valued above all else: fear and respect. "Prepare a full report for the Emperor," he said quietly. Tell him the truth." His officer hesitated. "Sir, are you certain? The Emperor already lost his son. This news may—" "He deserves the truth," Corrin interrupted firmly, though his voice cracked slightly with exhaustion. "Lies will only bring more death." The officer nodded slowly, moving to prepare the transmission, while Corrin sat quietly, staring out at the endless stars, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Back on Threx's prime, the mood had shifted dramatically since the fleet's departure. Streets that once buzzed with pride and confidence now sat quiet, worried whispers replacing the earlier celebrations. Inside the Grand Throne Hall, Emperor Valus Threx received the news in silence, his face pale and drawn as the full report was read aloud before him. 250 ships lost, the messenger said quietly. Admiral Corrin's flagship disabled, though he survives. The remaining fleet retreats now toward home. The Emperor said nothing for a long moment, his hands gripping the arms of his throne tightly enough to turn his knuckles white. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. 2 empires' worth of ships, he said quietly, lost to a single border defense. No one answered. No one dared. The Emperor rose slowly from his throne, his tall frame suddenly looking older, wearier than it had just days before. "Leave me," he said quietly. The hall emptied quickly, officers and advisors hurrying out, leaving the Emperor alone with his grief and his shattered pride. Elsewhere in the palace, Ambassador Sorel stood quietly with General Draymon, both watching the news spread quickly through worried whispers among the palace staff. "This is not over," Draymon said quietly. "The Emperor's pride is wounded deeply. He may seek revenge again, regardless of the cost." Sorel shook her head slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps, but even an emperor cannot ignore reality forever. 2 fleets destroyed, thousands of lives lost, and nothing gained. Eventually, even pride must bow to truth. Draymond studied her carefully. You believe he will seek peace? I believe, Sorel said carefully, that we must offer him the chance to choose peace before pride pushes him toward complete destruction. She turned to Draymond, her voice steady and determined. I intend to request an audience with the Emperor myself. It is time someone spoke plainly to him without fear. Draymond nodded slowly, respect clear in his eyes. Then I will stand beside you, Ambassador, whatever happens next. The audience took place quietly, away from public eyes, in a small private chamber within the palace. Emperor Valus Threx sat wearily upon a simple chair, no longer the proud ruler seated high upon his throne, but simply a tired old man carrying the weight of terrible losses. Sorel entered respectfully, bowing slightly before speaking. My Emperor, she began carefully, I understand this is a painful time, but I ask you now, humbly, to consider carefully what path lies ahead. The Emperor looked up slowly, his eyes tired but sharp. Speak plainly, Ambassador. I have little patience left for careful words. Sorel nodded, choosing her next words with great care. 2 fleets, hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, lost in pursuit of vengeance. The Terran people did not seek this war. They warned us clearly, repeatedly, and answered force with force only when provoked directly. The Emperor's jaw tightened, though he said nothing. Sorel continued, gently but firmly. If we continue this path, we risk losing everything. Our fleets, our soldiers, perhaps even the Empire itself. I ask you now, my Emperor, is vengeance truly worth such a terrible price? The Emperor sat silently for a long moment, staring down at his hands, memories of his son weighing heavily upon his heart. Finally, he spoke quietly. My son believed strength alone could conquer anything. I believed the same once. But strength without wisdom is merely recklessness. He looked up at Sorel, his eyes weary but clear. What do you suggest, Ambassador? Sorel took a careful breath before answering. Peace, my Emperor. A formal recognition of the Terran border, an end to hostilities, and perhaps in time a path toward understanding between our peoples. The Emperor considered her words carefully, silence stretching long between them. And if I refuse? He asked quietly. Sorel met his gaze steadily. Then I fear the next fleet we send will not return at all. The Emperor closed his eyes, the truth of her words settling heavily upon him. Meanwhile, far away on Earth, Commander Elias Rook stood once again before the great holographic map at Terran Command, watching quietly as reports confirmed the Imperial fleet's retreat. Commander Talia Reyes entered the room, her expression thoughtful. Sir, we've received an unusual transmission, a private request from Ambassador Sorel of the Galactic Council. Elias raised an eyebrow slightly. What does she want? She requests a formal meeting, Talia said. She believes the Emperor may be open to discussing peace. Elias considered this carefully, his expression calm but thoughtful. Peace, he repeated softly. That is precisely what we have always wanted. He turned to Talia, his voice steady and resolute. Arrange the meeting, Commander. Let us hear what the Ambassador has to say. Days later, a small private meeting took place aboard a neutral space station positioned carefully between Terran and Imperial territories. Ambassador Sorel stood nervously, awaiting the arrival of representatives from both sides. Commander Elias Rook arrived first, calm and composed as always, accompanied quietly by Commander Talia Reyes. Shortly after, a small Imperial shuttle arrived, carrying General Draymond and, surprisingly, Emperor Valus Threx himself, dressed simply, without the grand robes or symbols of his usual authority. Sorel greeted them both respectfully, gesturing toward a simple round table set at the center of the room. Thank you both for coming, she said quietly. I believe it is time we spoke honestly, without pride or anger clouding our judgment. Elias nodded calmly, taking his seat across from the Emperor. The Emperor studied him carefully, his tired eyes searching for something, perhaps understanding, perhaps simply an end to his grief. "Commander Rook," the Emperor said quietly, "you have cost me dearly. My son, my fleets, my pride." Elias met his gaze steadily, his voice calm but respectful. "I take no pleasure in the losses you have suffered, Emperor Threx. We did not seek this conflict. We sought only to protect what is ours." The Emperor nodded slowly, understanding clear in his tired eyes. "Ambassador Sorel believes peace is possible between us," the Emperor said quietly. "Do you share this belief, Commander?" Elias considered his words carefully before answering. "I believe peace is always possible," he said finally, "so long as both sides genuinely desire it and respect clearly established boundaries." The Emperor sat quietly for a long moment, weighing the commander's words carefully. "Very well," he said finally, his voice heavy but resolute. "Let us discuss terms." The negotiations that followed were careful, deliberate, and respectful. Both sides acknowledged the painful losses suffered, agreeing clearly to recognize the Terran border as an established boundary, never again to be crossed without explicit permission. In exchange, Terran Command agreed to open limited diplomatic channels, allowing careful, controlled interaction between Terran and Imperial representatives, laying the groundwork for future understanding, though trust would clearly take considerable time to rebuild. As the meeting concluded, Emperor Valus Threx rose slowly, his expression weary but calm. "This is not the outcome I expected," he admitted quietly, "but perhaps it is the outcome the galaxy needed." Elias nodded respectfully. "Peace often comes at a heavy price, Emperor Threx, but it is a price far lighter than continued war." The Emperor extended his hand slowly, a gesture of respect rarely offered by an imperial ruler. Elias accepted it firmly, sealing quietly what both hoped would be a lasting peace. News of the peace agreement spread quickly across the galaxy, bringing relief and cautious optimism to countless worlds who had feared a war of unimaginable scale. Back aboard the watchtower, Ensign Mara Cole watched quietly as news reports confirmed the peace agreement, relief washing over her tired shoulders. "It's over," she whispered softly to herself, a small, genuine smile forming on her face. Commander Talia Reyes, standing nearby, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "For now," Talia said quietly, "but the peace we've won today we must work hard to keep." Mara nodded, understanding clearly the weight of the commander's words. Back on Earth, deep within Terran Command's underground headquarters, Commander Elias Rook stood quietly before the great holographic map, watching calmly as tensions eased slowly across the galaxy. Commander Talia Reyes entered quietly, her expression thoughtful. "Sir," she said softly, "do you believe this peace will truly last?" Elias considered her question carefully, his gaze steady on the vast stars displayed before him. "Peace is never permanent, Commander," he said quietly. "It must be earned, protected, and renewed constantly. But today, we have taken an important step." He turned to face her directly, his voice calm but firm. "Our line still stands, clear and unbroken, and as long as it does, the galaxy will know clearly, Terran Command defends what is ours, not through conquest, but through discipline, wisdom, and unwavering resolve." Talia nodded, a quiet sense of pride and determination settling within her. "Fire and iron," she murmured softly. Elias glanced at her, a faint knowing smile touching his lips. "Fire and iron," he agreed quietly, "but always, always in defense of peace." Together, they turned back toward the glowing map, watching quietly as the galaxy slowly began to heal from the wounds of war, the Terran line standing strong, a silent promise to all who dared challenge it again. The Empire had learned its lesson, and the galaxy, for now, breathed a cautious sigh of relief.